What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, November 11th, 2020, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting a long, slow glide down to pow on a Friday, and all kinds of insanity to ensue, therefore. We've got a lot to talk about today. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble. We're going to do news until we run out of news, and then we'll start taking phone calls. And like yesterday, it's probably going to be a little bit later before we open up the phone lines. I got a lot of emails from people saying that they really liked that we were doing more news and less phone calls. And so it's probably going to be more toward the top of the next hour when we open the phone line. So, don't get nervous if you're not getting through here. Anyway, it is Veterans Day, and there are celebrations and commemorations all across the country, including in Washington, D.C., where I understand they got rained out. And it is a good day to really think about all those veterans who served in these wars, and especially the ones who didn't come back, fighting for what they thought was a constitutional republic with a democratically elected government. And they were just as much victims of a lying government as anybody else, except they paid a much more severe price for that. Anyway, for those of you down in Florida, apparently Hurricane Eta is not done with you yet. It has re-strengthened to hurricane status, and it's about to strike Florida up toward the northern part this time. And they're saying it's a Cat 1 with maximum sustained winds at the core of 75 miles per hour or higher. So if you are one of our listeners there in the northern part of Florida, please take care of yourselves and, board up your windows and, just be careful, be aware. All righty, now getting into the political news here. Republican Dan Sullivan has won his re-election in Alaska. It was a bit of a nail biter, and so that brings the Republicans to 50 senators. And, there's still another runoff race to go. But right now, the Democrats have 48 seats. The Republicans have 50. And so the Democrats are not going to take control of the Senate. And Trump also picked up Alaska's 3 electors with 57% of the vote. Now, over on Newsmax TV, they had a video where the chair of the Federal Election Commission, Trey Traynor, just came on out and said voter fraud is taking place. And yes, it's a study in foregone conclusions and stating the obvious. And it is obvious to anybody who's paying attention. And even the corporate media is having to deal with some of these stories about voter irregularities, but they're still out there saying, well, the margins are too great. It's not going to affect the outcome. There wasn't enough of it. And that is an absolutely ridiculous statement to make for 2 reasons. First of all, as much voter fraud as has been uncovered, nobody can say that all of it has been uncovered. There's probably a lot more that they got away with that we didn't see, and that leads into the second reason. Anybody who's going to try and steal an election is going to steal it by enough to win. They're not going to go out and say, well, let's narrow up the race a little bit so we don't look quite so bad. They're out there playing to win or playing to steal. And so all of these media pundits out there saying, well, however much voter fraud we find, it's not going to change the ultimate outcome. They're lying to you. They're absolutely lying to you. And I'm sure they don't want the outcome to be changed, because then they're all going to be looking like the rear end of an equine because of their rush to declare Biden the President of the United States of America, which is kind of weird because the Constitution does not say anything about wealthy media having anything to do with the declaration and choosing of the president here. Now, a careful analysis, and this came out of Investment Watch blog, a careful analysis right now is showing that less than 50,000 votes total would be needed across 3 key swing states to make Trump the winner. And this stands right in the face of all these other, again, corporate media pundits saying, oh, it would take hundreds and hundreds of thousands of votes for Trump to win. No, it wouldn't. It is that close. Now, down in Georgia, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. And Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger basically came out and announced a hand recount of the presidential election. And he's saying he's doing it to build confidence. It is an audit, a recount, and a recanvass all at once. And so they're busy trying to do that. Now, right now, Georgia's Representative Doug Collins, who unfortunately lost his bid for a Senate seat, is leading Trump's campaign Georgia recount effort, and basically saying that Republicans stand by the ideal that every eligible voter should be able to vote legally and have it counted. It is a noble ideal. It is what is stated in the Constitution. And then you have over on the liberal side these professors out there saying that, well, you know, legal voter is really racist and we shouldn't be using that here. Now, we were talking the other day, pardon me, about how Fox News literally cut away from a White House press conference with Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany. And she was basically there to show 234 pages of affidavits stating that election fraud was taking place across the country. She was going to list new cases the Trump campaign alleges to have uncovered. But fortunately, even though Fox News shut her down, shame on Fox News, by the way, the video of her complete presentation has gone viral. It's all over the net, so you can see what it is that Fox News did not want you to see. Another story here. This is from the Gateway Pundit. Analysis of the election night data from all states shows millions of votes either switched from President Trump to Biden or were simply lost using these Dominion election systems, which were used in 28 different states. Okay. Now, over at Zero Hedge, they're reporting that a data scientist who was preferring to remain anonymous for the obvious reasons basically analyzed the mail-in ballot data and came to the conclusion that it too indicates massive fraud in the mail-in ballot data, saying it simply defies logic. Over in Detroit, a poll challenger witnessed election workers counting ballots for non-eligible voters. He was then kicked out of the counting area for having noticed that this was going on. Lou Dobbs is also reporting on the fact that the Dominion software was used in 28 different states and presumably performed as poorly or as intentionally fraudulently in all of those states as has been uncovered so far. Now, here's an interesting story, pardon me, and this is over in Oklahoma. And apparently there was a church that was used as a polling place, and then the very next day was used for a wedding. And when some of the wedding workers went to take out the trash, they found the trash loaded with all kinds of discarded ballots. Lots of them. And apparently they were all but a few were for Joe Biden. So once again, we're seeing ballots being destroyed here. Trump has filed an emergency injunction in Michigan alleging fraud and is demanding a recount over the use of those Dominion machines. And I'll tell you right now, if they audit any of those Dominion machines and they come up short again, Trump is going to ask for the same thing in every one of the 28 states where those machines were being used, because clearly to be the most generous possible, they're buggy and inaccurate. To be more practical and realistic about it, they were hacked to steal the election. So Trump has requested this emergency injunction to prevent the state of Michigan from certifying the result of last week's elections until election officials can certify that only legally cast, on time, and legally observed ballots are counted. And Trump's campaign is alleging several types of fraud, misconduct, invalidated ballots based on a number of reasons, including the malfunctioning, to be generous, vote counting machines from Dominion voting systems. Let's see. U.S. elections, news media have no constitutional role to play in selecting the president. This is from former Virginia State Senator Richard Black. And of course, he's absolutely right. It's not up to the corporate media. Right now, it's supposed to be up to the voters. After an honest election, it's up to the Electoral College. And, you know, until somebody concedes, the media has no place declaring somebody to be the winner, and they're selling it. They're selling you Biden as a president the same way they're selling you the latest car or the latest fashion or the latest song or the latest medication. It's a sales job is what's going on here. Now, down in Texas, their Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, has offered a $1 million reward for hard evidence that supports claims of election fraud. And this is certainly an uptick from Project Veritas, which has got a $25,000 reward out there. And it does seem like as the days go by, more and more people are stepping forward to say, yeah, I saw this stuff going on here. And here's another good one. This is from Clark County, Nevada. As you're already aware, there's supposed to be a signature check. In some states, they arbitrarily said, well, the signatures don't have to match between the ballot and the original registration, which is a dead giveaway that fraud is taking place here. But apparently, in some of the highly contested localities in Nevada, they were using an artificial intelligence program to verify signatures on the mail-in ballots with virtually no human oversight. And the company that produces this AI software has close ties to Lockheed Martin and Microsoft, and its founder is an enemy of Donald Trump. Okay. Over at MIT, Dr. Shiva Ayadurai, he's a systems scientist, and basically he is saying that his analysis of voting fraud in Michigan shows 69,000 votes were transferred from Trump to Biden. And here's where it gets interesting. Ballot counting machines take a picture of the ballot, and then the picture is scanned to actually count the votes. But many states do not require storage of the ballot images, even though the ballot images are what is actually being counted toward the election outcome. Now, federal law says all records from the election have to be saved for 22 months, but many states delete the ballot images in violation of federal statutes. We had another story we ran about a week ago on how one of the states was discarding ballots and destroying them, so that in the event of a recount, these spoiled ballots couldn't be looked at to make sure they were genuinely spoiled. Now, here is something really interesting. If you have gone over to blackboxvoting.org, and Bev Harris is there, one of the things she talks about is the GEMS election software. And she was able to get a copy, an early copy of the source code that showed how it was coded to steal elections. And it turns out back in 2001, the GEMS system had a feature added to it called weighted race. Now, this so-called feature tallies races by weights. So the software can be figured out of the box to give votes on a ratio of one candidate to another. Say 2-to-1 in favor of Biden if one was so inclined to configure it that way. So a single vote for Trump would count as 1, a single vote for Biden would count as 2. Now, there is only one reason for such a feature to be in the GEM software, and again, that is to steal elections. All right, another aspect of this has to do with mathematics and something called Benford's law, which is used as a check if a set of numbers are naturally occurring or manually fabricated. Benford's law has been applied to detect voting frauds in the Iranian 2009 election and various other applications, including forensic investigation, and Joe Biden's votes violate Benford's law, which means the same system that is used to search for election fraud in other countries is signaling election fraud here. Now, the other day, a lot of people started posting this to social media, and the response was almost immediate. Facebook and Twitter suspended all accounts that posted stories on Benford's law, showing that Biden's implausible vote totals indicated fraud. And here's where they added salt to the wound. Facebook and Twitter labeled such stories as sexual exploitation, to try and damage the reputation of those people whose accounts had been taken down. And basically, the social media giants are preventing Americans from seeing this mathematical evidence that all is not up and up, okay, in the elections. Over in Pennsylvania, 99.6% of the mail-in ballots went to Joe Biden. That seems statistically improbable. And just now on Fox News, they had a story where a Pennsylvania official is out there insisting that only 10,000 votes were received after the deadline on election day. This is being done, I think, so that if the Supreme Court overturns the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court's extension of the voting deadline, that they don't have to go back and recount all the votes that really did come in after the election deadline, because there were reports that a lot of votes came on in, okay? Oddly enough, the states are starting to turn on each other. Ohio and Missouri are suing Pennsylvania over this election. Now, Republican attorneys generals have filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court of the United States to rule on the Pennsylvania mail-in ballots. And these are 10 Republican attorneys general from several states, and they're urging the Supreme Court to get involved with this case. Now, of course, if the Supreme Court takes the case, they're going to rule that the extension of the voting deadline, the voting counting deadline, rather, was a violation of Pennsylvania's state constitution, that the governor does not have the authority to do that. It must be done by the legislature. And again, I think that's why they're trying to say that they only got 10,000 votes after the deadline. They're trying to basically hide the steal, as it were. Oddly enough, we're starting to see whistleblowers come forward who are Democrats. And apparently this is in Michigan, and Rudy Giuliani is going to be filing a lawsuit based on this tomorrow. And they're saying enough fraud has been exposed to flip Michigan back to Donald Trump. I mean, it just goes on and on. Lawsuit in Michigan, defendants instructed election workers not to verify signatures on absentee ballots, to backdate absentee ballots, and to process all ballots regardless of their validity. I mean, there's no gray area there. That's election fraud. And apparently Joe Biden's campaign is basically trying to ignore Attorney General Barr's and the Department of Justice investigation into voter fraud with as much dignity as they can muster. They released a statement saying it's a clumsy and cynical partisan political scheme. I don't think they need to bother. I don't trust Barr to actually conduct a real honest investigation, and I think that's why the Department of Justice's chief election fraud investigator quit. Okay, the General Services Administration is still refusing to turn over $10 million in transition funds to the Biden camp, saying that Joe Biden hasn't officially won yet until after the Electoral College and a winner is declared. All right, we got to take a break here for some commercials, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and again, a friendly reminder, actually pretty much plea in the dark here. Republic Broadcasting Network needs your help. This is a fight for the future of the Republic. It's a fight for the future of independent media. Because if the Democrats succeed in taking control, they're going to want the independent media to go away, because we've been a thorn in their side going all the way back to the murder of Vincent Foster. And so we need your help. So once again, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. Okay, getting on back to the news here. Another story from Investment Watch blog saying it's going to the Supreme Court. Trump could still emerge the 2020 election winner. Right now, all eyes are on Georgia and their hand recount of the paper ballots. And if it comes out significantly different than what the machines said, that's going to open the door to a lot of challenges to every single state where these machines were being used, which I think would be a good thing. And again, getting on back to blackboxvoting.org and Bev Harris, she's been fighting this fight for years and years. And again, if you have not seen it, there's an HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy, which shows how obvious this is. This has been going on a long time. Abraham Lincoln's re-election campaign they tried to use phony mail-in ballots to get him out of office back then. So this sort of chicanery has been going on for a very, very long time, which doesn't really obligate us to go along with it now. And again, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. And that is what is happening right now. All of America is paying attention to this. And that's why we had that poll we reported on earlier in the week, where less than 1/3 of the American people think Biden was legitimately elected. Now, the Democrats have rushed out with their own poll claiming that 90% of Americans think Joe Biden is the legal president. So we've got dueling polls out there. I should get the banjo out and do that whole thing again. Now, one of the corporate media lies that came out earlier today was the claim that this USPS whistleblower in Erie, Pennsylvania, had recanted his testimony about vote fraud. And it was all over the news. Oh, he was lying. He didn't really see anything. But the whistleblower has gone public saying that absolutely not. He has not recanted. He stands by what he said originally. He was apparently grilled by federal agents for 4 hours, and they would not let him go until he signed a statement. And apparently he didn't read the statement carefully enough, because somewhere in there was something that said, well, I may not have seen, we don't know what was in there. But that was the basis for them going to the corporate media and saying, see, he's recanted. We've got him. All of these people claiming that they saw election fraud, they're all a bunch of liars. And so he's out there, and he's a very brave man, because he doesn't know what he's going to be doing in the future. If Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has her way, everybody who supported Donald Trump is going to be out of work very, very soon. And that includes, obviously, this postal whistleblower. Okay, apparently, no, hang on a second. There it is. We just lost our video. And I'll try and restart that when we come on to our next commercial break here. Somebody pointed out, this was over on Scoopy Web, the difference between 2020 and 2016, because back in 2016, Hillary's claim that Russia interfered in the election was allowed all over social media. It was just everywhere to be seen. But today, social media is shutting down any mention of voter fraud. It was like, Russian interference. No, it's impossible to interfere with our elections. It's very, very obvious. It's like they think we actually don't have any memories out here. Okay, apparently our video has come back. Yes, there it is. Another little story. This one is coming out of altmarket.us. I hope they're wrong. I fear they are not. And it's basically saying it's time to get ready for chaos, regardless of who winds up in the White House. And basically saying that, you know, with the Senate still under GOP control, the Democratic control over the House greatly reduced. It's the Biden-Harris administration may see itself as a lame duck, and they may go to some extraordinary lengths to try and get things going. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. Our video is doing fine, so we'll be back in a few moments. Welcome back to our show here. We're continuing with the news, and as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're probably going to open the phone lines more toward the top of the hour so that I can get some of these talking points taken care of. Interesting little article coming out of paulcraigroberts.org, basically saying that the West has thrown itself into the wastebasket of history, and I believe he's absolutely correct about that. And he starts out saying that if the courts uphold the current election laws, the vote fraud is going to be overturned. Trump will be declared the winner. There's no doubt about the vote fraud. The question is whether Trump, in the face of media hostility, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and weak-kneed Republicans, will have the support to see the fight all the way to the end. And it's kind of hard to see, you know, what is going to happen if, in point of fact, the courts say that, yes, there was election fraud, it's got to be undone, and Trump is the winner. I can't think of anything that is more likely to inflame Antifa and Black Lives Matter. I mean, if if Trump had won in a landslide last week, yeah, there would have been some riots and everything, but now they've had a whole week of thinking they've won, and if it's taken away because of the vote fraud issue, they're going to be absolutely furious, and it's just hard to predict what's going to happen there. But Paul Craig Roberts basically says whoever ends up in the White House, the country is now irredeemably split. And red state Americans understand that the stealing of the election is a coup d'etat against them. White people have been demonized as racists and are being made second-class citizens in the so-called land of the free. And the brazenness of the election theft and the media's 100% cover-up of the theft has brought their vulnerability as, quote, white racists, end quote, home to them. So, yeah, that's something else that a Biden presidency, they're going to accelerate this whole idea that white people are bad and, you know, should have limits put on them. We're going the same way that South Africa and Zimbabwe did, and it didn't work out very well for anybody in those countries. Another story, this one is over in the New American, and not too surprising here. Election uncertainty is prompting a surge in gun sales, and this is out of concern that if Biden and Harris do in fact become the next administration, they're going to enact all kinds of gun grabbing, gun banning laws, and Americans are now purchasing a record number of guns and ammunition. As well they should. FBI figures reveal more than 3.3 million background checks for gun sales were conducted in October alone. This is a 14% increase from September and a 38% increase from 1 year ago. All righty. Now, we mentioned this a little bit before in the show. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is compiling a blacklist of Trump sycophants. And basically, this blacklist, it's called the Trump Accountability Project, is archiving the names of individuals who elected, served, funded, supported, and represented President Donald Trump. Well, if you elected him, if you voted for him, supposedly there's no way they can track that back to you. But anybody who worked for him or sent in a donation, and certainly those of us in the independent media who were working for Trump, actually I was working more against Biden, just like I worked against Hillary. But yeah, we're on their enemies list now. Now, Tucker Carlson is very, very popular. He showed a lot of courage yesterday when he wagged the finger at his own network, Fox, for cutting off Kayleigh McEnany's press conference where she wanted to talk about election fraud. And, you know, his program has got a record number of viewers. And a little surprising, there's been rumblings about this in a bit. Tucker Carlson may leave Fox News to pursue a career in politics, and that he may consider a run for office in 2024. Well, Tucker, there's also 2022, unless you're aiming for the presidency. And, you know, who knows? He's a great speaker, and he says a lot of the things that we all like. And they'll probably give him the Trump treatment as well here. Representative Ilhan Omar has called out Senator Joe Manchin for sharing the narrative that progressive policy ideas are the reason congressional Democrats failed to meet expectations in the 2020 election. They did not take control of the Senate. They lost seats in the House, but they're still in control of the House, but only by a slim margin. And the latest word we're getting is that Nancy Pelosi does not have the votes to remain Speaker of the House, because a lot of Democrats are blaming her for the lackluster performance. Actually, I think you go back and you look at all those fraudulent votes for Biden that only voted for Biden, and they just weren't paying attention to the other races and the other contests here. All righty, getting on more to you know, what's going to happen when Antifa and Black Lives Matter realize things, you know, might be lost, that the courts might say, yes, the vote fraud has to be taken out of the election. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is drafting anti-mob legislation, basically expanding Stand Your Ground to allow armed citizens to defend themselves against violent rioters and looters. I think it's an excellent, excellent idea. I'm not even sure why it's necessary. Many states have either Stand Your Ground or the castle, what they call the castle clause, as in a man's home is his castle. And you're allowed to defend your home up to and including the use of lethal force if, you know, it's absolutely necessary. So good for DeSantis to do that. And of course, you're seeing all these places where Black Lives Matter and Antifa are calling for the defunding of the police, and some very idiotic state councils, city councils rather, who are going along with it. And there was a story out here early today about how violent crime is just skyrocketing in Minnesota ever since they cut back their police force. All right, a couple of stories here about COVID-19. It's still out there, and apparently as the corporate media continues to push the fear porn over COVID-19, grocery stores are reinstating purchase limits on certain products like, you know, toilet paper. Over in Great Britain, big government has ordered supermarkets to literally barricade aisles with what are deemed non-essential items during this second British lockdown. And apparently a lot of people are very angry. They can't buy things like kettles, socks, and baby clothes. So it's just really, really insane. Getting to the international news now, the president of Azerbaijan apparently scored on a BBC journalist on media freedom. BBC News correspondent Orla Gurin was questioning President Aliyev about the supposed lack of media freedom in his country, and Aliyev basically came on back and said, "What about Julian Assange? You can't talk about media freedom while he's still languishing in prison." So good for him. The Philippines has once again suspended their plans to order U.S. troops out of the country. And the Philippines wants to end their long-standing military pact with the U.S., but apparently somebody somewhere made a phone call or, you know, dropped off a briefcase full of money. But Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin released a statement saying Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte had instructed him to convey his decision to extend the suspension of the abrogation of the Visiting Forces Agreement by another 6 months. All righty. Apparently, the United States has approved a $23 billion sale of F-35 jets and MQ-9 drones to the United Arab Emirates. It's being hailed as a game changer in the Middle East. And they're going to receive, the UAE was going to receive up to 50 F-35 jets and 18 battle-ready MQ-9B drones. And of course, Israel will demand that we honor the quantitative advantage agreement, or demand actually is what it is, and get them some goodies. Apparently, the Trump administration, between now and Biden's inauguration, is going to pile on more sanctions on Iran every single week, just trying to absolutely crush them down. And the goal appears to be to make it impossible for Biden to go back to the Iran nuclear deal, which, if you remember yesterday, Israel was saying that would result in a war between Israel and Iran, which would in turn result in a war between Iran and the United States. Now, speaking of chutzpah, Netanyahu, as you're aware, recognized Biden as the president-elect, even though it's not official. Then he turned around and he delivered a list of favors that he expects Donald Trump to give him between now and Inauguration Day. So there we are. All righty, over at George Washington University, Professor Amitai Etzonio, sorry, let me do that one more time, Etzonio, okay, prominent American scholar who teaches international relations, has overtly suggested that Israel should flatten Beirut, Lebanon, which has about 1 million people in it, supposedly to get at Hezbollah. It's a little bit of overkill, and I think it could seriously destabilize the region. Okay, let's see. For nearly 4 years, Donald Trump's Middle East policy has been the gift that keeps on giving for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. With Trump raging, over his claims the U.S. election was stolen, some officials and analysts are worried he'll use the last 10 weeks of his term to grant more favors to Netanyahu that could complicate Biden's approach to the region or tip it into complete chaos. And yeah, it's definitely possible. Here's something that's a little bit interesting in the economic news area. AT&T wants to dump CNN. They currently own it, but CNN is losing money as fast as it's losing viewership. And at one point, Jeff Bezos was talking about buying CNN from AT&T to build a true media empire. But now it looks like he's getting cold feet on that idea, and it's really not looking all that attractive to him. Well, here's an idea. If Trump is in fact ejected from the White House, he could buy CNN. He's got the money to do it, and turn it into a more centrist, objective, and fair news network that would get the viewership back. I think that would be a really good idea. Disney is planning to furlough even more workers, including the executives, at its California theme parks, and says state guidelines leave reopening in limbo. Now, there was a story that came out just yesterday, again on Fox News, where a lot of officials and politicians in California are calling on Governor Newsom to allow all of the California theme parks to reopen before they simply are driven out of business. And again, it gets back to the idea, how real is the COVID-19 threat? And again, now that the election is pretty much over, I think it's going to gradually fade away, because it was being held up there for all the fear porn because the Democrats were using it to pound on Donald Trump. And now that the general election is over, except for the court fight, there's not much reason to keep that going. So we'll see what happens there. Apparently, Washington, D.C. has reached an agreement to include additional sanctions against Russia's natural gas pipeline, the Nord Stream 2, to Germany in a must-pass defense bill. And again, this is when we look at the blueprint for the new America, one of the rules we have to have for Congress is each bill is for one purpose only, and you don't load it up with a bunch of irrelevant junk that's got nothing to do with the prime purpose in order to get things through that are really not a good idea. But apparently the fresh sanctions against Nord Stream 2 would target insurance and certification companies working with Russian vessels on the completion of the project. This would be included as part of the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act, which must be passed by the end of the year. The U.S. will now have to notify its allies before imposing the new sanctions. Okay, now, pardon me. Over in China, the Communist Party has expanded their crackdown on China's tech billionaires after spoiling the IPO of Ant Financial. And Jack Ma may be China's richest man for now, but in the span of a week, Beijing's decision to postpone the IPO of Alibaba's Ant Financial unit offering in Shanghai basically brought this guy to heel. And it may have been a message being sent to all the other tech billionaires because apparently Jack Ma had the audacity to criticize China's financial regulations during an appearance at a high-profile industry conference in October. His comments didn't make waves at the time, but apparently somebody in the Chinese Communist Party noticed. Norwegian Air is basically saying they may not survive the pandemic. It has grounded all but 6 of its 154 planes. It's only going to fly within Norway now. Okay, now. Let me get a message to our control room. Getting into some other miscellaneous science news. Apparently, because it's not COVID and because it wasn't the election, it didn't really get a lot of corporate media coverage that Japan is going to release over 1 million tons of highly radioactive water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant into the sea. And they've basically got, it's all stored up, but they've got no place to put any more of it. Efforts to create a water cleaning plant have failed. The ice wall failed. All they can do is dump it into the ocean, and it's going to be a huge, huge mess. We got to take a break for commercials. When we come on back, we're going to start taking phone calls, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our show. We're opening up the phone lines now, area code 512-248-8252, and we're going to start with David in Boston. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Mike. Mike, you can hear me okay, right?
You're a tiny bit garbled, but yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Mike, you know what is so ironic, an irony of ironies. I was thinking about Tom's, rant about me and about the white woman and New England is and blah, blah, blah. And it's so ironic, Mike, because he claims that he supports President Trump, and yet President Trump has been plagued, his whole presidency has been plagued by guys like Mike. He's had to continuously disavow their support. He's even gone so far as condemning these race haters that talk about white and black and these sexist, misogynist haters. And, because women have always suspected Donald Trump of being like a male chauvinist, sexist and everything. And he's bent over backwards to try to allay those fears and try to disprove that he's not a male chauvinist, sexist. And here's Tom. Tom's actually almost like reinforcing that image of Donald Trump by being so sexist and hatred for white women, and so he throws in the race thing with the white and the sexism with the woman, and it's Mike, there's a radio station up here in Boston, WRKO. It's the talk radio station.
Yeah,
in Boston.
that's an oldie but a goodie.
Huh?
I said WRKO is an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah, and there's one talk show host comes on. I listen to him every morning from 6 to 10. Jeff Cooner. He calls himself Boston's bulldozer, cleaning up the liberal bull. But Mike, most of his callers are females, and caller after caller after caller, they all support Donald Trump. And then in the afternoon, Howie Carr is on, and once again, caller after caller, all these female callers, they all support Donald Trump to the hilt. So if Tom thinks that all these white women up here in Boston or up in New England are like Elizabeth Warren or something, guys like Tom are President Trump's worst enemy. He's been, like I say, he's been trying to throw that image off. He's been plagued by that image of being a male chauvinist and all this stuff and everything. And then as far as Miles go, Miles didn't stick up for the white woman up in Maine, and then he took his time on the call to accuse, which I think is a cheap shot. The stuff, I'm off my meds, and I need to get back on my meds. And you know what my answer to Miles is? About this business about being off my meds and everything, and like I'm some kind of a
we've got to tone down the bickering and the interpersonal fighting, and somebody's set up a Reddit sub just for all of the callers to name call each other. All right, David, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. Got another call waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and the phone lines are filling up. In fact, I think they just became full. So, if you're calling in and you get a disconnect or a busy, just wait until one of the callers hangs up, and then a line will be free and you can call on in. Once again, the number is area code 512-248-8252. So let's go to Doc in Illinois. Hello, Doc. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Michael. I remember earlier in the show today you were talking about how bad the rioting would be if Trump somehow does pull this off and gets himself a second term.
Yes.
I just wanted to make something very clear here. Biden is not Black Lives Matter or Antifa's guy. In fact, I think I'd go so far as to say that for them, Biden is the new Trump. I don't know if you've seen what's happening in D.C. or other places, but they are making it very clear that they hate Biden, they hate Trump, and they've even gone so far as to say they don't want a president at all. And they're targeting houses that do have Biden signs out front. There is footage of that as well. So I really think that either way, it's going to be really bad because the left certainly is eating itself in this aspect.
Well, there are two things to keep in mind. And first off is when Hillary lost in 2016, you had all of these liberal Democrats, lefties that did go rioting and causing a lot of destruction. And I note that since the election last week, where Biden is being anointed as the president by the media, we have yet to see a Republican burn a building to the ground.
Oh, yeah, totally. And I really do think that it's all falling apart on their behalf because I really think at this point they don't know what they want. I think they're just sure that Bernie did not keep true to his words about standing up to the Democratic Party, and they're upset that he sold out to them as well. So I really think at this point they really are just accelerating for true lawlessness everywhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why they were pushing for defund the police and everything, and we're already seeing the results of that all across the country. In fact, apparently Minneapolis is so desperate because of the exploding violent crime rate, they're actually bringing in law enforcement from other areas to try and get a lid on it all.
Yeah, it really is getting crazy around here. I know around here where I am, it certainly is, but that's what I wanted to call in about. I don't think the riots are going to call anytime soon if Biden does actually become the next president, and I think we're stepping into a whole another mess on our hands. But thanks for having me on the show, Mike. That's all I had to say.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch to Dan in Washington. Hello, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. I called about the election fraud, but about the topic the last caller was talking about, I disagree. I think if Biden gets elected, Black Lives Matter and Antifa will pretty much just disappear. You won't even hear from them because it's basically a psyop. So
yeah, I tend to agree with you.
Yeah, I mean I don't see them. Once they're not needed anymore, they're just going to defund them or whatever. Tell them all to go get a job or whatever they do. But I'm getting concerned here. I think this might all be just a Republican. I do believe there was fraud.
Yeah,
I was watching election night when Michigan changed. But the concern I have here is there really isn't, look, evidence. You've had Steve Pajanik come on and lie about, he was on Alex Jones saying there's these watermarks and it's all a giant sting operation. You've had Project Veritas, which basically always leads to nothing. I mean, Project Veritas is just whatever. It's all
well,
like
it doesn't always lead to nothing. I mean, apparently some lawsuits are being filed on the basis of some of these whistleblower complaints, and not just for the election, but I mean, going back a way, look at the amount of trouble that Project Veritas caused for Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, but we still got Planned Parenthood. I mean, Project Veritas it's a biased organization. They got an agenda. My only point is this: if there was real fraud, the Republicans need to go to NPR, because NPR is just reporting no fraud, no evidence of fraud.
Yes.
But they are public radio, and the Republican senators should be going to NPR saying this is the actual cases of evidence. You know, if the computer did switch the votes, that's fraud, and we need to talk about that on public radio. You know.
Well, it's not just NPR. It's not just NPR here. And, you know, I get emails from people saying, well, you know, the corporate media is saying that there's no evidence of election fraud. And my response to that is that the same corporate media that told you Saddam had nuclear weapons?
Right. Exactly. So, and I don't trust the media. I trust RBN a lot more than NPR. I'm just saying that a lot of people do watch NPR, and they are just normies or whatever you want to call them. So they need to do a better job at actually getting out evidence, if there is any, and telling people what that evidence is really quick.
Well, it would be nice if NPR and NBC and CBS and CNN and PBS all did the job they're supposed to be doing, but they're not. They've obviously been co-opted by the globalists' liberal agenda, and their job right now is to sell you Joe Biden as the president. As I said earlier in the show, it's exactly the same as when they're selling you a new car or a new coat or a new T-shirt or a new medication.
Well, I agree, but the Republicans have a duty if Bob Barr finds major evidence, not like a ballot here or this or that, you know, like tens of thousands of votes. They need to be going on talk shows and talking about this specific evidence, not just saying there's all these little examples, you know, because otherwise the whole thing is just going to fade away, I think.
Well, the corporate media isn't going to allow anybody to talk about it. I mean, look what they did to Kayleigh McEnany just yesterday. Anybody who gets up there, doesn't matter if they're a senator or a member of the House or even Trump, they start to talk about election fraud, they get cut off. I mean, we're talking about social media and the corporate media censoring the president of the United States of America. I mean, that is how completely out of control and tyrannical it's become.
Right, but I mean, they're in a way they're right, because what specific evidence do all the Republicans have that there was major fraud? And they do have the ability to go on these shows, like if they were all on the same talking points, like here's this computer that flipped these votes, that's evidence.
Yes.
You know, and they all were on.
That's why they're going back in and they're doing checks like they're doing in Georgia. You know, and apparently in Michigan, you know, Trump has filed a lawsuit to have those Dominion machines checked out. And I'm sure they're accumulating the evidence now. I don't have a lot of confidence in Attorney General Barr doing an honest, objective job. I'm looking at Judicial Watch, who has already launched their own investigations across the country. I think they're going to dig up the evidence of election fraud.
Yeah, I hope so. But I mean, you know, they need to do a better job at actually proving it and getting that out. And the Republicans, if it's almost like, you know, if Trump doesn't have the backing of his own Republicans, this whole thing.
Well, that unfortunately is true. I mean, a lot of Republican never-Trumpers. You know, Trump was an outsider. He wasn't a member of one of the crime families that run this nation. And he came on in and he spoiled things for Hillary Clinton. And neither she nor any of her associates nor the government as a whole have ever forgiven him. Because, you know, for the first time in recent history, I mean, he totally upset their little apple cart by coming on in and proving that enough American voters could actually prevail over election fraud, which is why this time the election stealers doubled or tripled down to the point where it just became obvious to everybody what was going on.
Yeah, and I definitely think there was. I mean, just seeing those votes slowly coming in for Biden. Yep. And it's also weird that the Republicans kept their seats in the Congress, but I don't see a lot of people voting Republican for Congress, but voting against president is weird too.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see. I mean, we'll see what Barr says and comes up with. But if it's not going to be anything really good that people can really see, then it's all going to go nowhere.
No, like I said, I don't have a lot of confidence in Barr, and I'm waiting to see what Judicial Watch is going to do and the outcome of these various lawsuits. And yeah, the entire system is stacked against the truth coming on out because, you know, massive election fraud on a national level, it first of all delegitimizes the election system itself, and by extension, the entire federal government. And that's why they're all afraid right now and trying to make this go away. That's why they grilled that USPS whistleblower for 4 hours and coerced him into signing a statement to make it look like that he'd taken back his testimony about what he saw. And he's now out there on a new video saying, no, he stands by his original statement. So they're playing all the old propaganda tricks, trying to get this thing under control, and it isn't working because, again, every day that goes by, new information comes out.
Yeah, well, that's the best case, I think, is the Supreme Court saying when Trump did that stay on the voting or whatever, or requested that the votes or the counting stopped after the deadline. To me, that's the best bet, but you know, again, like, who cares? One guy, postal worker, supposedly said that. I mean, if you're talking about millions of votes here, there's got to be, you know, who made the computer, who programmed it, who
well, definitely. And, you know, and a lot of attention is focused on the Dominion voting systems, which both Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi are tied to. And I think that's a very dangerous situation when you have politicians actually owning or in control of the companies that make and operate these election machines. I think that should have been banned from day one. And it's one of the things that Trump could have done and failed to do. And if by some miracle he does pull off a victory in the court system, I'm definitely going to be burning up that White House mailbox with letters saying, you've got to clean this mess up. You know, there are so many problems with our election system. It's wide open to fraud. The first thing we need to do is return voter ID, because without that, you know, you've got millions of illegal immigrants voting, and they're trying to defend it by saying legal voter is a racist term now. and we're not supposed to use that anymore, but I'm going to use that. There are legal voters and illegal voters, and it's not racist because illegal isn't a race.
Right, exactly. All right, well, thanks for taking the call. I'm just waiting to see some big, real stuff here if it happens.
There's a lot of stuff
day.
out
Thank
there. There's enough out there to have convinced most of Americans the election was illegitimate. We're going to switch over now to Mark in North Carolina. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mark. How you doing? Well, first of all, I don't know if you know this, but you're talking about the postal worker there. He's an ex-Marine, by the way, and combat Marine, in Afghanistan. All right. So that's for one thing. But the other thing is, Rudolph Giuliani was on earlier on a show called David Webb, XM.
Yes.
And Giuliani said this guy, they had a wire in this guy when he went into the interview with these, and he said they tried to badger him and all the, they were threatening him and everything else. He called them thugs. He said it's like the mafia he actually took on when he was the U.S. attorney back in the Southern District. But they had a wire on the guy, so they recorded the whole thing. So, and the guy he told Veritas again that what he said did happen, and there's no reason not to believe him. There's tons of evidence, Mike, tons and tons of evidence. I understand Trump also fired that witch there, Gina Haspel, today too, which is a good thing.
Oh, good.
And that's
good.
That's what I heard in InfoWars, okay? And that's great because that also shows me that Trump is starting to make moves. I saw that bum there, John Brennan. He looked all nervous and scared. I think that Trump is starting to make his move now, that he's probably starting to get together the people that would be loyal to him, the parts of the military that would be loyal to him. And I think he's getting ready that if nothing else works, he's not going to let this step take place, and he will probably declare martial law. Now, look, I'm not I'm not a great Trump fan. I'm very disappointed with a lot of the stuff. Even now, this thing he described as Iran, and a couple other things, sanctions and all. The thing is, I also love this country, and I want to see this country survive the constitutional republic. And I don't want. And on top of that, you cannot let out-and-out blatant steps of an election take place. It's up to his duty now. It is Trump's duty that if all else failed now, to declare martial law and order a new election that will be supervised, let's say, by having a U.S. Marshal in each voting place, or even a soldier, a few soldiers, a few marshals in each voting place around the country, and using only paper ballots, right? When I say martial law, I'm not talking total martial law, but I'm talking about certain cities should be under control because they're showed that they're too violent and dangerous. That's mostly New York, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, Los Angeles, a place like that. They need to be, they need some kind of a curfew there, and they need to be surrounded so they don't, in other words, they need to have a ring of steel around these cities so they don't go out into other areas. But if they do, I'm confident the American people ourselves that we'll take care of the problem. Okay, I'm not afraid of Antifa. They will be brought down, and we don't need the police to bring them down. We got enough armed citizens in this country, enough people like the Oath Keepers, by the way, who was also on Alex Jones, I think yesterday, Stuart Rhodes. And he said they're ready, just march in Washington now. He says they're in the background, and if somebody tries to overrun the White House, him and his guys are ready. And these are all basically hardcore veterans. And it's not going. I think we the people are not going to let them do this. Like, I really do. And like I said again, it's Trump's duty as an American to see that this doesn't go through. This is a theft. It's obvious. I heard this guy from Washington before. I don't know what you don't know what he's talking about. There's tons of evidence. All right, I could go on and tell you about it, but then again, I'd need more than the rest of your time there. I don't want to take that much time out of you anyway. Okay, there's tons of evidence. An idiot, a pure idiot, can tell that this was a theft, right? Doesn't take. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be a mathematical genius either. I'm not. I hated math in school. I flunked it many different times. Okay, but I know enough about basic math. No, this was impossible. An impossibility. This is theft. It needs to be something that needs to be done about it. Now, I would like to see, hopefully the courts will do the right thing. But if they don't, the last resort, Trump should declare. And I think he's ready to do it too. I don't think he fired. In fact, he fired Haskell, and the fact that he's making a lot of. He fired Esper. I think that's enough. I think he will. He is not going to let this go. Okay, and nor should he let it go. They get very nervous. John Brennan was basically calling for Section 25 again or something like that on Trump, but he was saying it with a very scared look in his ugly face.
Yes.
Okay? That is an ugly dude anyway, Brennan, I mean...
all of the people who are part of this stealing the White House operation, they have reason to be afraid. They didn't get away with it. They didn't convince the American people that this election was on the up and up. And, they have to be afraid. Anyway, Mark, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for a commercial. Got more callers waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the phones here to Ken in New York. Hello, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I don't know why everyone is so concerned over Ocasio-Cortez and her list, because I just saw an article, it's a couple days old, on Info Liberation, and she thinks she has a future as an e-girl streamer, and she was thinking about quitting politics. And it would be perfect for her, but I don't think she's going to make as much money on it as she does in Congress.
True.
But she is very disappointed that all of the many Democrats are blaming her for the problems that they're having. I'm not surprised that they're getting thrown. If they're getting, how many Democrats have lost their congressional positions? That you know of?
Quite a few losses in the House of Representatives. They did pick up a few against Republicans. A lot of seats changed in the House of Representatives.
Musical chairs.
Yeah, musical chairs, but the Democratic control of the House is much, much slimmer than it was before, and a lot of people are looking not just at Alexandria, well, the squad, they're also looking at Nancy Pelosi as being the reason for that.
Yes, it looks like she may be going bye-bye also.
Yes, at least as Speaker of the House.
That's all I had. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to Joe in Tennessee. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, real quick, to that one caller about worrying about getting on NPR, and I say this about NPR and all the media, the mainstream media. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Don't spend your time even caring about what they say anymore. True. Turn off your Fox News. Turn off, and nobody pays attention to them. Only like brain dead idiot zombies that you're not going to change their mind anymore. Besides the fact that this isn't a political thing anymore. This is legal now. It's all about the state certifying the votes. And then the state legislatures in all these states that are toss-up states now are all controlled by the Republicans. Donald Trump's got this in the bag. And just having more and more exposure of the corruption is just going to work into the hands of either the state legislatures or the courts. So to worry about NPR, I mean, come on. And really, I called yesterday and said that when the Department of Justice getting involved in this fraud was not a good thing. And lo and behold, the next day it comes out they're trying to get this guy in Erie, Pennsylvania to recant. Yeah. In my mind, I see them like the Inquisition, recant in a dungeon, I mean, it's so sickening, but not surprising with the Bill Barr Justice Department and Wray and the absolute thoroughly disgusting people in the FBI. And I'm tired of hearing about how they're all really good, except just a few on the top, like Hannity says. They're all monsters. Recant, like something out of the Middle Ages. Do they realize what a crime it is to backdate post? The post office, when you get a dated stamped envelope, that's a legal document.
Yes, it is.
That is so illegal. Whoever did that should be in prison. Yet they want the whistleblower. They want to put pressure on the whistleblower, and they want to make it disappear. That's what Barr wants, Sergeant Schultz. I see nothing. Anyway, I'm sorry, but I'll let you go. Get another caller. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. And I'm going to hold off more phone calls until after the next commercial break because I have a comment here. And that is, getting on back to claims that there isn't really any hard evidence yet. There's a lot of evidence out there. But the single greatest proof that something nefarious is going on with our election is the actions of the Biden supporters. They act like they have something to hide. This situation with the USPS whistleblower up in Erie, Pennsylvania, is a good example of that. If the Democrats and liberals and Biden supporters thought that Biden had won honestly, they wouldn't care about recounts. They wouldn't care about any of this other stuff that was going on. But I mean, look at how hard they're working with their cohorts over in the corporate media to try and make this go away. They couldn't look more guilty if they tried. Is really what it comes on down to. All righty, well, the phone lines are loaded up again, but I'm not going to take a call until after the commercial break. So let's get on back to some of the science news, because I love doing science news here. And apparently, there is now a plan. This is over in Wired.com. There is a plan to try and recover some of these abandoned upper stages of rockets that are still in orbit and actually convert them for use as space stations or warehouses or anything else that might be of use in the booming space economy, because it's these are perfectly good giant metal tubes. And if you remember Skylab, that was basically started as a third stage from the Saturn V. So it's a really good idea. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the phones here during the break here, I am unable to confirm that CIA Director Haspel has actually been fired, but apparently it is being talked about. Personally, I think it'd be a good idea. Anyway, back to the phones here. Keith Rogers, welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Mike, I want to try to keep this short here. So, on my last show on perception management on Sunday, I detailed what was going on as far as towards Trump and why the so-called deep state wants to get rid of him. But first, I'd like to say this. A couple of years back when China first started to build on the Spratly Islands, they were trying to get, what's his name, over in the Philippines.
Duterte.
Anyway, trying to get him to what do you call it, like move things forward in provoking China. Mm-hmm. And then we see that under Obama administration that they were going to open up 5 bases over there. Then it turned out to be it was going to be 8 bases. And what it is that the U.S. was going to employ 30,000 Filipinos over there to actually rebuild the ships and stuff for the U.S. Navy and stuff. And a good friend of mine, I hope, from Hawaii used to say, all wars are bankers' wars. And now we see U.S. troops are in Taiwan right now. Yeah, never heard of them, huh? Anyway, so in lieu of that now, where Donald Trump went wrong, and that was the theme of my show Sunday, and it was packed with audio from everything. When Donald Trump came to power, the first thing he said, he said he wanted to get out of NATO. And that shocked Europe. And then he came out with that mega Make America Great Again speech. It's going to be America first and only, And then, unannounced, Trump pulls troops out of Germany and throws them into Poland with that new, ICBM missile battery type thing up there. Mm-hmm. And Angela Merkel says, we've already been at war with Russia twice. We don't want a third world war. And now we have, just recently, and I don't want to misquote myself. So in November of 2019, the Trump administration had moved to substantially cut its contributions to NATO. Mm-hmm. And then in October last month, that Trump has threatened to pull out of NATO during the summit in Brussels. And this is in the presence of everyone. And this deals, as you mentioned, with the sanctions of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and stuff, as well as with Turkey, too, with sanctioning Turkey over the S-400s. And this involves Greece and also Israel's pipeline up through there. But anyway, to summarize this whole thing up, it includes Iran also, because you have all these member countries over there in Europe that have tens of thousands of employees. They're not just in defense, but they have to keep their people employed too. And now we have the United States that sits out there and they sanction country after country for doing business with Iran or whoever, with Russia. And the way to sum this entire thing up, and I study the CIA, you know that.
Yes.
The CIA goes out there and they cause all these problems so that the United States can say, hey, you need our security. And then, of course, the U.S. gets mad because you're not paying your fair share of the bill. Well, had the CIA stayed out of those areas, they wouldn't need it. So now when we, in a massive summary of the whole thing with this so-called pandemic, if this pandemic was all about saving lives, then why are they ramping up the billions of dollars in arms sales around this planet? It's because they're getting ready for something. So, as Trump fights the globalist, he still can't fight the other portion of the deep state here that wants this full spectrum dominance of the United States.
Yes.
And that's our problem today. And now, since Europe says that they're welcoming the new Biden administration, they still have their fears because it's the Biden administration, the Democrats, that are the anti-Russians. And so this is just going to provoke more tension towards Russia. And that's part of the NSC 68 doctrine that has been formulated since the 1950s, which was the original purpose was to drive all countries into the so-called bosom of the Soviets, their eternal Satan, to give them the premise of a preemptive move. And that's why we always hear about a preemptive strike on Russia.
Yes.
And now we heard about China, you know, and it's the same thing. The U.S. is losing its hegemony across the world.
Yes, it is.
The dollar system is failing.
Yep.
And the U.S. needs to do something. They want a big, huge distraction. And you can see that when you see them openly talking about lowering the conscription age in the military down to 16. And what a great opportunity for millions of now unemployed burger flippers to be conscripted into the military to rescue this great country of ours. But anyway, I invite anyone to look through the archives to listen to that show. There's a lot of audio and video from all these different countries explaining exactly why they want Trump out and why they want a new administration. But that's all I have, Mike, okay?
All right, well, thanks an awful. All right, thanks, Keith Rogers, and we're going to let you go here and switch over to David in West Virginia. Hello, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
A couple comments about the media and bias therein. One of your earlier callers was saying, who cares about the people who watch mainstream media? They're a bunch of brain-dead idiots or something to that effect.
Yeah.
The problem is there are a lot of those brain-dead idiots, and they vote. Beyond that, though, there's not all of them are brain-dead idiots. I think we in the alternative news community sometimes get a little snobby, and there are a lot of people in the world that in the first place don't have the knowledge to deal with online news.
Yeah.
They don't have the time. They've got a family, kids, house to take care of, car that's broke down. And to them, what's going on in the world is what happens in the hour of news they watch after supper. And
yes.
I'm old enough that I not only grew up before the internet, but before cable news, before CNN. And when I was growing up, the news was Huntley Brinkley or Walter Cronkite. A half hour. You got a half hour of local news and then a half hour of national news. and that was all there was. And that's just, there's a lot of people, that's all they have time for. And it's something we need to pay attention to, because there are just going to be a lot of people, the masses, that's where they're going to get their information. And the other thing I want to say is that we seem to have gotten used to the idea, accepted the idea, taken for granted the idea of bias. I mean, everybody that's got a brain would say that CNN and MSNBC are leftist, Fox is rightist. Okay.
Well, Fox is still more. Fox has started shifting to the left, apparently, under pressure from its ownership, and a lot of people have, Fox's ratings are in decline right now, despite Tucker Carlson, because of the way they apparently turned on Trump. However, in their defense, I'm looking at what they're running right now, the 5. And they were talking about the bias in the media and the double standards, about how they're trying to basically say that, anybody who's looking at election fraud is a conspiracy theorist. And they always go gentle on Joe Biden. They certainly did on Hunter Biden's laptop story. If an ordinary citizen had a laptop full of those kind of pictures and videos, they'd be in jail already.
Well, that's true, and right now they won't even talk about the stuff on the computer of Hunter doing business in China.
Yes, they won't talk about that.
I'm gonna plug an outlet here that you have linked to on your site before, which is True News, and if you watch them, you find out there's a lot of stuff on there related to Hunter Biden having sex with children that is beyond the pale. And this is what Tucker was referring to, I suppose, the other night when he said something to the effect of, there's other stuff on there, but we're not going to cover it because Hunter isn't running for president, and not only that, I know him. And that's kind of sad. But what I wanted to say, though, was there was a time when I was growing up when any bias in either direction was considered improper in the news media.
Yes, that was certainly what I was taught.
Well, and somebody I want to compliment here, and I'm reluctant to mention a name because somebody will poke holes in him and find problems with him. But I watched a lot of NPR news or PBS news, which was McNeil Lehrer.
Yeah.
And then McNeil left, and I was left with Lehrer. And the thing is, as much as I watched him years or decades, to this day, I couldn't tell you if he was a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative. And that, to me, is the hallmark of a good journalist.
Well, it's the hallmark of a good journalist, but the people you see on the TV screens these days have less and less control over the content. They're paid to basically look good, read the teleprompter, and be very convincing to the American people. And the content of the news comes from above. And ever since the end of World War II, all of the various government agencies have sought to control the corporate media to use for propaganda. The most infamous program was Operation Mockingbird by the Central Intelligence Agency, and they basically reached a point where every top executive at every corporate media outlet is a CIA asset.
I'm familiar with Mockingbird, and one of the quotes from one of the CIA people about it costs less to get a journalist in Washington than it does to get a hooker.
Yes.
And that's sad. But there was an attention to bias back. What I'm saying is back in the 50s, an attention to bias, and it was considered improper. And there was at least they tried to have the appearance of impartiality. And
they
don't even try.
They don't try and hide it anymore. Nope.
Yes, we are left wing. We are right wing. Trump is the great Satan, or Trump is the savior of the world.
Bad orange man.
Yep. Anyway, that's about it. I just wanted to say that about the media, and mainly though that it is important just because so many people, that's all they have time for, is one news show a night. And
well, I understand that, but we also know that the ratings for the corporate media news outlets are in decline. And like I mentioned before, Fox's ratings are in decline. Meanwhile, the audiences at the independent media continue to grow. One of the reasons my site has become so troublesome lately is just how many readers are signing on to read, and sometimes it actually makes it difficult to get new things up on the site. So that's a really good sign. Hopefully somewhere down the road I'll get a more powerful server.
Well, yes, alternative media is growing, are growing.
Yes.
But we're not there yet. And at this time, we still depend, the future of our country depends a lot on what people on mainstream media say.
But less and less here. And by the way, I prefer the term independent media to alternative media because of the negative connotations placed on the word alternative. Anyway, David, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Michael, good evening, good day. Aloha. First off, I do want to say Chicago is the same as usual. Biden supposedly been the president-elect, but 22 shootings Monday. Tuesday had 19 shooting. I think 5 dead on Monday and 4 dead Tuesday. So today's Veterans Day. So, you know, this is going to be the same as usual in Chicago or all these other cities, no matter who the president is with these liberal, licky-kissy-touchy mayors and these imbecile governors. And, Mike, I got to clear this up, man. You know, yesterday the guy called me a reptile. And if I was that reptile, I'd like to either be a boa or a rat snake. Okay? But this guy's calling out people names. This guy's calling names. You know who's calling names. Okay? He's throwing names out because I mentioned about white women in the New England states. Well, Mike, you know what? It's the truth. The founding fathers.
Well, hang on, Tom, first of all, we're trying to cut down on the interpersonal bickering and arguing here. And second, to be very honest, you were painting with a very broad brush, you know, by saying all the white women up in New England, you know, were voting for Biden. And we certainly don't know that for a fact at this point.
Well, you know what? I don't have time on your show to clear that up because I didn't mean it like that. What I meant to say, look, New Hampshire, a lot of the white women in New Hampshire did vote for Trump. So I thought it was a great thing. I didn't get a chance to finish because I don't have the time to stay on your show getting into semantics. But I mean, I'm just saying a good majority, I should have said a good majority of those women are very ultra-liberal. However, there are some wonderful, beautiful white women. White women are, to me, they're awesome. They're beautiful. Okay? Now, I'm just saying, their ideology, they think more emotionally than they use their brain. They think more with their, not logic, but with their heart. I understand that. What I was trying to say to you, Mike, there was a good sign in New Hampshire. New Hampshire won all these other seats except the presidency. They won the governorship. They won the House seats. They won the state legislator body. But here, what I'm trying to say is to that one caller that these New England states, they're always going to, it seems to be, remain blue unless somebody gets to these majority of the women up there and say, listen, what are these policies doing for you on the Democratic side? They're crippling our nation.
You know, I have to speak.
Mike.
I have to speak in defense of New Hampshire. It's not always been blue. When I was growing up there in New England farming country, it was definitely red. You know, my grandfather was drinking buddies with Richard Nixon. But over time, you know, the liberals do target the blue states, rather the red states, for, I guess, for lack of a better word, subversion. Anyway, listen, Tom, we got to take another commercial break.
Let me ask you a question, Mike.
Real quick.
Mike, you think Hawaii will ever go back red? Because I don't think Hawaii's ever been red. Well, what would it take for that state to go red, or a lot of these other states that are like
would take a miracle.
Massachusetts, where you got Pocahontas.
Tom, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercial. Back with a few more phone calls. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program today. We're going to try and get through these last phone calls, starting with John in California. John, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, good afternoon, Michael. Good show. I got in late, but I just want to say about the election. I was a poll worker in my city. We went 4 days, and they gave all the options, mail-in voting, come down and vote. You can surrender your ballot, vote. We accommodated everybody registering, no problems. Everybody was, coworkers were great. The voters were great. And the only thing different about this was there were no scanners. They used all the ballots went in a box. Every night it went down to the main area. And the question is, where they were counted, who did it, how did they pick these people, and it still was probably put in a computer, and that could have been compromised there too. But other than listening to all this stuff in the country, it's very appalling. But I was glad to do the work. I've been doing it since I retired 8 years ago, and I enjoyed it. So, yeah, I hope that Trump keeps on it. They file these lawsuits, and if these liberal judges, Democratic judges, are dismissing him, get him off the bench, pull him off the bench, and put somebody in honest. So anyway, thank you for that, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you very much here. We're going to switch over to Murr in Wisconsin. Hello, Murr. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. Hey,
Hi.
Isn't it curious that watch is something we used to do to keep the enemy out, and now
Yes.
it's something that's done to let the enemy into every corpuscle and nanoparticle of their being?
Yes.
So man up and man caught, all the Talmudia, all of it. We've got independent media. We don't need them. We have us. But I wanted to tell you, too, Amitai Etzioni means tree of life. A man named Werner Falk renamed himself that, and he is the main constituent of communitarianism that he's been teaching out of George Washington University. But
Okay.
when he was in Palestine, he bombed the British. See, as soon as the Jews got into Palestine, they right away were killing off the British, too. It wasn't like it was some nice, easy transition. It was like, get out of here, we got
like
this.
bombing of the King David Hotel.
Yeah. But I also wanted to tell you it's really election fraud, not vote fraud. It's kind of a misnomer. But at the Phaser, that's Phaser, and I'll send it to you. There's a really good video there everyone ought to watch. There are 5 other companies besides Dominion, and all the votes are hosted in another country, in a foreign country, and they are served from yet another foreign country. So there's a real mess going on, but this is a really good video.
It
and,
is a huge
it
mess.
has the, pardon me?
I said it is a huge mess.
It is. It is. But this video, if you go to YouTube, you have to sign in for age. But if you watch it from the Phaser, maybe it's somewhere else too. But it also has that clip that's being passed around. Jim Stone had it where 500 votes on CNN went from Bevan to Scheer in Kentucky, right on the
Yeah.
screen in front of everybody.
Yeah, that happened a
That's
lot.
one of the things in there. And McErney
All right.
and
Okay,
thank
Murr.
you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. There's the music here. My apologies to those callers who were not able to get on the air today. All I can say is call back in tomorrow. Call in, a little earlier, and we'll get to you, and you can have your say there. Anyway, stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of fascinating things to share with you. Please spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We are in a fight for the future of this republic, and we need your help. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.